Good evening. This week's Parsha is Parshat Metzora. Before I begin discussing Parshat Metzora and some of the interesting midrashim, I want to share with you a famous question that was asked. If you go into most shuls from Rosh Chodesh Nisan until the day before Erev Pesach, you will see them take out a Sefer Torah every day in the morning, after davening, bring it to the bima, open it, and the Balkany, somebody goes and reads from it. There's no aliyah, no bracha made before or after, but just the kriya. Now, what is he reading? He's reading the Nesiim brought when they dedicated and inaugurated the Mishkan. Every day, a different Shevet brought a korban. It started with Yehuda, Shevet Yehuda. Nachshon ben Aminadab brought it, and he was from Yehuda. That was the first day. And it says every day who brought. The first day was Yehuda, the second day was Yisachar, the third day was Zvulun, the fourth day was Ruvain. That their Shevet brought, and they brought the korban.
They're all the same carbons, and they didn't know it.
Now, Yehuda brought a korban, an elaborate korban, the first day. But it was up to each Shevet what to bring. So, when Yisachar, the Medrash says, that when Yisachar realized he was the second to bring, after Yehuda, a question came to his mind that should he bring exactly the same thing that Yehuda brought? And he was tempted really to add something a little different. And the Medrash says us on the words Hickory es Karbano, because for 11 Shvatim the pasuk begins Karbano karas kesef achas shloshim u'mea mishkala mizrak echad. That it begins the same way, Karbano, his korban. But by Yisachar, the second day, it says Hikriv es Karbano. Now Hikriv is a lashon of hifel, causative. In other words, he, as if to say that not only did he bring his own korban, but Hikriv es Karbano, that he caused the others to bring their korban. And it's the only one of the 12 that it says such a thing. All the others say Karbano. So the Medrash explains, like I said, that he was in a quandary what to bring. And he decided that if he goes and brings, let's say, brings something different than the first day, it's going to cause that every day afterwards, the next Shevet was going to try to outdo the one from before. Like a bar mitzvah, you have a class of boys that are 12 years old in the 8th grade, and they're all having their bar mitzvah within the year. So the first bar mitzvah, they serve a beautiful suda. It's chicken and soup and an appetizer. But If the second day the person said, well, chicken was served the first day, I'll bring steak. Then the third day the guy says, well, they brought chicken, they brought steak, I'll bring brisket. It would cause a spiraled competition. So Yisachar decided, I'm going to bring exactly what Yehuda brought. Excuse me. And hopefully everyone will follow suit, because once two did the exact same thing, it was comfortable, excuse me, for the third and the fourth to bring the exact same thing. So he stopped any type of needless jealousy, competition. I thought it was getting better. Anyway, so that's why it says Hickory, that he caused the others to bring the type of korban that they brought by the fact that he decided as the second one to bring exactly what Yehuda brought in the beginning. And all 12 brought exactly, without any exception, exactly the same thing, all 12 days. Now, we know that the Seder last week, and even though in many of the years we read Sazria and Metzora together, this year, because there's two Adors, we read them separately. But it really begins the discussion of Nagoyam and Saras, these two Sedras. So there is a strong connection to the two Sedras. Now, Meforshim asked, since most of the Sedra of Sazria last week and this week, all of the Sedra discuss the concept of Nagoyam, and even though we commonly say leprosy, but it was a spiritual sickness. It was not something which was contagious, or it just came out in a physical fashion. First, it came out in the houses. You saw on the wall. And it was supposed to be like a loud message to the owner of the house. And then if he didn't take heed and improve his behavior, then it went on to his begodim, to the clothes. And if he didn't take heed then, still yet, then it went on to his skin, to his body. But although 90% of Sazria deals with this, and Metzora 100%, the question asked is, why was the Parsha of a woman giving birth the beginning of Sazria last week? What does it have to do with these two Sedras? Why is it put over here, which really it belongs elsewhere? In Vayikra, when it talks about the different type of karbanos people bring, a different place. But we know that when a baby is in the womb of its mother, the Gemara says that it learns Kol HaTorah Kula. It learns everything. Before it leaves, some bring that a malach taps over here and it's lost, it's forgotten. So the question is, if it's forgotten, what was the purpose of him learning the whole Torah if it's 9 months later completely taken away from him and he loses, he doesn't remember a thing? So Rav Yaakov Kamenetsky, Zechrono Levracha, said a very interesting concept. I mean, many Meforshim discuss the idea that a child comes in with the full potential into the world, and he could end up Nebuch with Nagoyam, meaning it was a very public embarrassment. Yeah, we have a mitzvah, Bikur Cholim, which is a mitzvah, yet you were not allowed to visit him. He had to be Bodod Yeshev. He had to sit Chutz LaMachaneh, outside of the camp, outside of the camp. No one was allowed to go visit him, which is really against the essence of the Torah, that we have compassion. Someone's sick, well, you want to show and express your feeling for him. So he has to sit alone. But the truth, and the whole world knows about it. In other words, that he went out and they call him Tomei. I mean, it was really a very uncomfortable experience. So Rav Yaakov said that when a person lives in Olam Hazeh and has a shutfus, we know there's such a thing as Yisachar and Zvulun, that there's somebody who doesn't have much time to learn, and he goes over to someone and he says, I will support you. And the question in the Rishonim is, does each get 100%? Or is it split 50-50, the schar, the reward for all of that learning? But whether it's 100%, it's only 50%, the Rosh Yeshiva asked, what does a person... Sorry, I forgot to turn it off. What does a person do after he's nifter? And let's say he was a Zvulun, and his whole life he was supporting Yisachar. He became a tremendous Talmud Chacham. He supported him, his family. So he comes up, and Yisachar is going to go to a heichal of Torah learning, and they're going to enjoy, and they're going to bask in the luster of the Shechina. And Zvulun, what does he do? Because it says that you're only allowed to participate in heaven as much as you learned down here. That means if a person was busy watching 5 hours a day of television or playing with his telephone for 5 hours a day, and he wasn't learning, so you can't say, well, I was doing this, I was doing that. They don't accept excuses. And if you didn't learn, you're not going in there. So what does Zvulun do if he goes into the Heichel of Yisachar and they're all discussing, everyone in that Heichel, Torah learning? This guy didn't learn. So what's he going to do up there? So said the Rosh Yeshiva, by virtue of the fact that he learned Koa Torah Kula in his mother's womb, that enables him to, that is the key that enables him, if he supported a Yisachar, that gives him the ability to participate fully and to be comfortable in his surroundings. And that serves as the basis for the 50-50, so to speak. And he's able to be in a good spot. He's able to be comfortable and happy and enjoy. And that's the reason that parsha is at the very beginning of Sazria, talking about the woman who gives birth, because it's talking about a woman who had a baby for 9 months in her stomach. And at this point, when she gives birth and realizes that the Torah was lost, that there's like an admission when she brings the korbanos of how careful she has to be with this new child, because it can go all the way down the rung into the realm of Nagoyam, chas v'sholom, if this child isn't dealt with seriously enough and carefully enough in bringing up the child. An interesting thought. Now the Medrash says that Ravyanai, who was tremendous, Ravyanai was an Amora, and as I've said to you on occasion, the Gemara in Avodah Zarah says that anyone mentioned in the Gemara, the Mishnayos, had the power to be Mechayim Esim. That means if they walked into a cemetery and they said to 20,000 people buried there, stand out of your graves, they were able to do it. And if they couldn't do it, their name is not mentioned in the Gemara. So that means Rav Huna, Rava, Abaya, everybody was able to had that power. So Ravyanai once saw, the Medrash says, a peddler who went from door to door selling his fares, and he heard him calling out that anyone, I have an elixir, I have some medicine, that if you take it, you're going to end up with long life. So Ravyanai heard him calling. The Medrash says he came over to him and he says, I'd like to buy some. So the peddler said, this isn't for you, you're a tzaddik gomer, and you're... So he said, no, I would like. So he said, okay. And he said to him, what I am selling is mi ha-ish ha-chofetz chayim ohev yamim liros tov, somebody who wants long life, nitzor l'shon chomeira. Watch what you use your mouth for, what you say, how you say it, what you do. That is what the peddler said to Ravyanai. And Ravyanai's response was so unbelievable that Ravyanai said to him, my whole life I was wondering what the pshat in this pasuk was, and now what you just said enlightened me. And now I understand. You made a difference in my whole life. Ravyanai knew the same pasuk. What was so enlightening? And what was the thunder and lightning of this rochel, of this peddler, that it really made Ravyanai so happy that he asked him and he pressed him to give over what his wares were. So the Mefarshim say that Ravyanai thought always that if a person wants to be careful and not speak Lashon Hara, you have to become lahavdil elef, like a monk, that you go into seclusion, you don't talk, you don't do. And he saw from this Rachel that what does a Rachel do? He goes from door to door to sell his fares, and how does he make atmosphere comfortable that people should buy. Oh, did you hear what happened to Yankel from the other city? He would go from door to door and say things over that would catch the interest of the people, and then they would buy. So Ravyanai never realized, some Meforshim say, that the idea of someone so enmeshed, so involved in door-to-door activity and busy talking all day, that he would have the power to reach out and to have the people and still not talk any Lashon Hara. And that to him was a tremendous chiddush. Now others say a little bit of a frightening thought that when we say this pasuk, Ohev Yomim Liros Tov, that we think that if a person watches how he talks and what he says and what he doesn't say, that will cause him to live longer in this world. So some Meforshim say very clearly, as a matter of fact, it's the Choivos HaLevavos, that even the Balatanya said a person should learn every day Choivos HaLevavos. That's how staturous and outstanding the statements, all with Ruach HaKodesh stated. The Choivos HaLevavos says it's not talking about Olam Hazeh. The pasuk is talking about Olam Haba. And that was the reason that Ravyanai was so overwhelmed, because he says, and it's a little bit frightening, that when a person speaks Lashon Hara, he takes the Averis from the person he's speaking about, he takes his Averis onto him, and the other person that he's talking about gets his Schusim. So the Choivos HaLevavos even tells a story of somebody from his town that when he was nifter, he came up and they showed him all the Chil Shabbos that he did. And he protested and he said, that's not me. I was never Machal Shabbos in my life. So they told him, yeah, but you were busy talking about someone who was a Machal Shabbos, and you got his Averis. So it's very hard to understand the Cheshbonis Lamala, how this works, and how a button of tshuva, just pressing the button and propelling oneself into the realm of tshuva, solves everything. He gets back and he's able to undo all the unnecessary and negative things that he brought on himself. But that's what the Choivos HaLevavos says, that this Rachel revealed to him the dynamics of someone who speaks Lashon Hara by explaining the pasuk in that way, and it opened up a new vista completely to Ravyanai with all of his greatness, and that's why he says it. My whole life I was wondering what is the true meaning of this pasuk, and I just learned it by hearing from the Rachel. Now, we know that there is, as I said before, the first nega that comes to a person who is either very stingy or talking Lashon Hara, it comes into the bias. And the only one who was allowed to paskin was the Kohen. And the person who came to the Kohen and said, please come and take a look at the wall of my house, he had to say the Lashon kinega, like a sort of nega. Kinega, in other words, nega means he would make a statement. There is nega in my house. But to say kinega means as if it's not definite. And the Tosfos Yom Tov indeed says that you learn out 4 things. There are 4 things that you can learn. He says 4 pshatim, that even if the person is a very big Talmud Chacham, and he knows that the Kohen who lives next door to him is not such a Talmud Chacham, he's an Amoritz. And he could tell him, he doesn't have to go ask him, but he's not allowed to pascha, it's got to be a Kohen. So he brings the Kohen, and the Ra'am quotes the Tosfos Yom Tov, says that Limeid l'shoincha lomar eini yodeya, that the reason that the person says, I think it's a nega, kinega, it's like a nega. He's not coming with a definitive statement. That a person has to learn how to be able to say, I don't know, I'm not sure. A person cannot posture himself that he's the expert, the know-it-all, even in an area that he does know. He should cushion his words when he makes a statement about an area that he's very fluid and very knowledgeable, in a way that he's not making it as a emphatic, definitive statement. He could say, I think it's this or that. He cushions a little bit what he says. The second thing, says the Tosfos Yom Tov, derech eretz, and courtesy to the Kohen. Because this Talmud Chacham knows that it is definitely a nega. So he could come to the Kohen, who hardly knows, and so emphatically say it that the Kohen would be afraid to say anything other, or it would lead him down the road of how to paskin. But when you start off and say kinega, like I'm not sure, is it or isn't, you give him room. There are some people who are so charismatic that they come into a kiddush or a malava malka or a chasna, they're seated at the table, and they suddenly begin to speak at the table, and they don't leave room for anybody to breathe. They consume the whole atmosphere by virtue of their personality and their overwhelming charisma, that no one has any room for themselves to express an opinion or to say something or to do. So says the Tosfos Yom Tov, that's the second reason that we say kinega. The third thing he says, besides what we just said, which was basically courtesy to the Kohen, I went into a little bit that he shouldn't be so emphatic what he says, to influence by how he says it, because he's expressing it in a expression of doubt, that he's not so sure. And the fourth thing he says is because that we should al tiftach per l'sotim, that we have such a thing that we can influence a situation by what we say. I know someone who got very angry at a young man who was the father of 2 children, and he was in his 20s, healthy, fine, well, no problem. And he had such disgust to this young man for a reason that I'm not going to go into. that he said one day, I wish HaKadosh Baruch Hu take him from this world now and take my schusim to do it. And an hour later, the young man dropped dead.
Oh my goodness.
So the power of speech we should never underestimate. You know, the whole Shmini talks about what you could take into your mouth, what's kosher, what's on. But Sazria Metzora really teaches us what is allowed to come out of the mouth, what you're allowed to say and how do you say it. And I even remember that this person who did it went to a very big tzaddik to ask how he could do tshuva. Because here the man died. He left over a young wife with 2 little children. It was such a tragedy, such a tragedy. And the tzaddik told him, he closed his eyes, and that tzaddik had Ruach HaKodesh without a question. And he opened his eyes, and he obviously saw that, yeah, what he said did it. And he gave him a derech of tshuva, how he could redeem himself for what had happened. So when we say Al Tiftach Peh L'Satan, it's not just like some type of superstition. That words do have an effect, and vehemence, and how we say it, and whatever. You know that Bilam wanted to curse the Jewish people, and Tosfos in Brachas and Dav Zion says, because the Gemara says it, that, and then Tosfos elucidates and explains, but Bilam knew that there's a split second every day that HaKadosh Baruch Hu was angry with the Jewish people. And if he would curse them in that split second, he could accomplish what he wanted. So Tosfos asks on that Gemara, what in a split second could he have said to destroy the Yidden? So Tosfos answers, he could have said kalem, just one word, and that would have gotten him into the door. And then he could have said whatever, because once your foot is in the door and you're inside, so he could have said more. And that's what he was hoping for. So, and the Baal Shem Tov said on that Tosfos, that you understand from that Tosfos that if somebody is davening Shachris and they're very late and they hit Chatzos, which is midday, and you can't daven Shachris after midday anymore, but once you say the first word of Shemona Esrei, Baruch, you're inside, you already got your foot into the door, and you can finish the whole Shemona Esrei, and you're inside before Chatzos, by just having said the one word Baruch before. And the power of doing so is able to make all of the difference. Now, the question asked is by the Tolaner Rebbe. In Eretz Yisrael, there's a Tolaner Rebbe, and he wrote beautiful Perushim and everything. So he asked the question, why? There's 3 types of Nagoyam. This whole discussion about Kinego and the Tosfos Yom Tov gave us 4 reasons. Why is it only by Nigei Batim? Why not by when the person sees on himself a nega? That when he comes to the Kohen, he has to say, Kenega nirali babosar, bayad, whatever he says to him. And why not, let's say, with begodim? Why don't we say Kenega there? So when he brings a raya from a medrash, that the Torah is speaking to the man and how he is raising his children. What kind of household do you have? That is the message. And all four of these things that we said from the Tosis Yom Tov, for instance, the first one is that a person should learn how to say Eini Yodei. I'm not sure, I don't know. You don't always have the answers, even when you think you have the answers. Say it in a cushioned way, because if you overimpose in your house with the children, you're going to put them into a position of fear to express themselves. Because you know everything, and you're always so sure of yourself. So where's the room for them to be able to express an idea or a thought that may not be what you said? And the second thing of courtesy that we have to give to children in a classroom or in a household, we have to give them the room to be able to feel that they have their own worthiness. Because if the Kohen, the big Talmud Chacham, comes in and he didn't say Kinnega, he set an atmosphere that he was intimidating the Kohen. The Kohen doesn't know anywhere as much as he knows, and he becomes the big know-it-all, and there's zero courtesy given to the Kohen. And his stature, the Torah said, only a Kohen can pronounce, no one else. The third thing with how to be able to unduly influence is referring to the household also. And that's why the Gemara says that a man should not put an Ema Yisera in the house. He shouldn't put that. The wife could get so afraid of him that she's afraid to tell him that they cannot be intimate. And she is not in a position to be intimate at that point. And she's afraid to tell him. He may get angry and say, oh, I have to wait now 2 weeks. So these things are important. And also, Al Tiftach Pel is something, because the truth is, and the Chaim brings it all over, that a person through his mouth could bring on himself super bracha or super chas v'shalom, the opposite. The mouth is a very, very powerful vehicle. Razor sharp. If somebody slaps, I've said it to you on occasion, somebody slaps somebody else versus they come over with a razor sharp tongue in front of 10 people, it's more painful, the razor sharp tongue of what they could say to the person publicly and destroy them, humiliate them, tear them down and all of that, than if they would have gone over and given them a slap. This hurts more. So says the Tolner Rebbe that this is all a message to us of how we have to shape and mold and develop the atmosphere of our homes. And that's why it's only kenega by the house, the nega of the household. Because it was a message to the man who suddenly saw on the wall of his house that there was a nega, and it was to give him a message about, you're not conducting your life. You were given family, you were given this, you were given that, and you're not really conducting yourself properly in how you are interacting with each and every member over there. Now, there is a famous question that is asked. It says in our Seder, Adam, Ki yeh be'or b'soro nega o baheres. So the Meforshim are curious why the word Adam, which is the most auspicious description of man. In other words, the level of a person, when the pasuk says Adam, it's not the same thing as Ish. Ish is a lower level. Or Enosh, there are other words to describe people. But Adam is the most lofty. So, and if over here he did something so bad that he suddenly sees all these Nagoyam, why would the pasuk call him Adam if that's the most lofty and the most beautiful description of how to refer to a man? We're talking in a parsha of Nagoyam that he did something wrong. So the Mefarshim answer and say that the difference is that over here, Vehuva el HaKohen, Vehuva el HaKohen means that he is brought to the Kohen. Who brings him? Himself. A person who's willing to admit, I made a mistake, I was wrong, not covering it up with 20 defenses and 20 explanations, but says, listen, I made a mistake, I was wrong, I'm going to the Kohen, and we're going to follow this through to what we have to do, and if it means I'm put into exclusion, and I have to think about what I did when I intermingled amongst people, so be it. But I'm ready and willing to make that statement, as humiliating and embarrassing as it is, because the whole town knew about what happened. If he's going out and no one's allowed to come near him and all of that. So we have to condition ourselves, as hard as it is, to be able to say we are wrong and we made a mistake, and to be able to move on. And Vehuva el HaKohen means usually a person is brought to the Kohen, because just like by a doctor, if someone's not feeling well, the last thing they want to do is go to the doctor, because many people are afraid what the doctor is going to tell them. And as a matter of fact, I was just laughing with Dr. Zemba, because there's a concept, and they tell it to the medical students, that when a patient goes to the doctor, the minute that the doctor walks in with the white coat, there is a 10% rise in his blood pressure. And I said to him, I mean, is that really true? He said, absolutely. He said, I have had many times, I walked into the room, they saw the white coat, the people fainted. I had to go run and grab them. They shouldn't bang their head. I mean, it's extreme. But he said it definitely happens, and not once and not 10 times, many times. They has to call out Sola and see how the person's doing. The fear from just the idea of a doctor that, you know, it's like the person sitting on the opposite side of the doctor after a examination. And the picture shows that the person sitting there, what he's thinking, it has like a bubble above his head connected. And it shows a operating room with 8 people around the operating table. And the doctor across from the patient has a bubble, and it shows 2 aspirins. So the patient is worried he's going in for an 8-hour surgery, and who knows what the doctor's going to say to him. And the doctor's thinking about aspirin, that he just needs, it's a common cold, he just needs some aspirin and whatever it is. Now, in the word Beveis Eretz Achuzaschem, the Medrash says the Gemara talks about it. There was a very famous occurrence, and it wasn't just once, it was very often, that people, when they heard Klal Yisrael was coming to take over Yisrael, they took their treasures and they hid them in the walls of the house. So one of the halachas that if a person sees a neged saras on the wall of the house, he has to tear down the wall. And Rashi says, and many times they found treasures. They won the lottery. They became a multimillionaire. So the Sfas Emes asked, well, was this a punishment or was this a reward? I mean, the guy was talking Lashon Hara, doing whatever he shouldn't have been doing, and he had to go tear down the wall to his house, and we think that that is a punishment to him. But meantime, he finds a treasure. So is it a punishment or is it a reward?
Once you fix it up, Hashem rewards you. Once you tear it down, I don't know, leave it up.
Yes, so the Chidushei Arim, the Zayda of the Sfas Emes, says that when it says in the pasuk V'yishalu ish me'reyehu klei kesef klei zahav, you're going to go out of Mitzrayim, you're going to borrow. Why did the pasuk say borrow? We know that they didn't borrow it. Borrow means you take something temporarily and you give it back. But over here, they took it and they left Mitzrayim and they kept it. So it wasn't borrowed. It was fine. It wasn't stealing because they were never paid for their work. They worked 210 years and they were entitled to be paid for their time. So the Chidushei Arim says that the reason the word v'yishalu, borrow, is employed is because it's the first time that Klal Yisrael ever came into money. And they had to know that you should know this is not yours, like you got it. Like a guy opens a company, oh, my genius, we made millions with my genius. If it wasn't destined from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, there were plenty of geniuses who died paupers and never succeeded. They tried this and they tried that and they tried this and they tried that, and it never happened. So v'yishalu, that they have to have in their frame of mind that when they're taking all this gold and silver, you're just like a person who borrows something that has to give it back. This is a gift temporarily. Let's see how you're going to deal with the money, because money can destroy families and destroy households. Everyone knows people. The two sisters were the best. They went to lunch every week together and they went shopping together. Now for 20 years they're not talking. Why? Because of the $60,000 that was a Yerusha, and who got the bedroom set and who got, that's it. The end of the whole relationship in Nebuch, that not only they, but their children, the cousins, are not going to each other's wedding, all over money. So when money is found inside of the wall, it was a message to them that you have now an opportunity to enrich the household and not have Nagoyam. What brought you to this was you were misbehaving. There was something wrong you were doing. And now the person, when he gets all this money, he has the message that money destroys and money can build. And if you do the right thing, you're going to flourish. The household will flourish in a good sense. If not, we're tearing down the walls, that's what's going to happen. You may end up with the money, but it's only going to lead to further destruction. So says the Chidushei Harim, and that's why the word v'yishalu is employed, and that's why when he finds it's not answers the Swasem as a punishment or a reward, it's an opportunity. That the person now knows he's in trouble because of this, but at the same time that he has to tear down his household, he is being given an opportunity to rebuild in the most positive, strong way. Now, the days of, as we mentioned last week, the days of Nisan are so auspicious that in each and every day you have the power of Rosh Chodesh. Normally, the whole month's essence is carried like a head carries the essence of the body. A hand cannot pick the arm up, the hand or the fingers, and move them without direction from the head. The same way Rosh Chodesh, the month has its head, and it all comes from the first day of the month. But in Nisan, the days are so lofty and so auspicious and so special that each day has the power to be mashpia in the month. And that's why we have no tainus or no hesped and no tachnun the entire month, because it goes into a separate realm and a separate category. And I do hope, Be'ezus Hashem, next week, when I will speak, it'll be the last time before Pesach, and we will share a number of ideas and talk about the Zohar HaKodesh, the Mechla, the Meimenusa, and what the matzah is, and the moror, and the kosos, and what type of roots it planted for each and every yid to be able to sprout forth to fruition, salvation and Yeshuos. And like when the Python said, Yeshuos bo makifos, that achoidesh asher Yeshuos bo makifos, that we are all encompassed within the realm of Yeshuos, and it's a very, very special time for a person to be able to excel and exceed in his avodas Hashem. Thank you and good night.
Thank you.